Okay, so we have a customer created now, and let's move through and start doing something to that account. So let's add a service we're going to bill them for, we'll activate the account, we'll run a payment, that kind of thing. Before we run a payment, we need to set up a payment processor if we want to take either credit card or bank account or e-check payments. So I'll show you quickly where to do that. If we go into Financial, under Payment Processors, we can set up bank, credit card, and PayPal processing. Let's go and do credit card right now just to start with that. So there's a list here of the processors that we support. This changes over time as we add more processors, so take a look in your system. But if you're using one of these processors today, you can just set up your credentials here. If you're not using one, we recommend IPPay in North America. They cover the US and Canada. If you're outside of North America, then you can take a look at some of these, like Moneris is available in Canada. I think BluePay is available in the US and the UK. We have ones like Stripe that are available in many countries around the world. So I'm going to pick IPPay here. And if your system's in test mode, it doesn't actually matter what you put in for the credentials. We're going to run transactions against that processor's test gateway. So you can just enter anything here that you like if you're in test mode. If you're in production mode, you're going to need to enter your correct credentials to be able to do anything here. So I'm going to put in test. Down below here we can pick the type of cards you want to run. Some of these are only relevant for specific countries, so you can either leave them checked or unchecked based on what you want to do. But let's say I don't want to take American Express, I could uncheck that here, and then Sonar will block American Express cards from being added into the system. Okay, so we have IPPay set up as our credit card processor, and now we want to go back to the account and start doing some work on there, adding services and running payments and that kind of thing. So there's a couple of ways I can get to the account. I could go to Accounts and go to View All Accounts, and this will let me look at a list of all my accounts and find them. But a better way to do it is to use the search system. So the search system in Sonar is going to let you search for almost anything in the system. We can use it to search for accounts. We can also search for different sections or network sites or an invoice or really anything we're looking for. And I can access this by clicking the search icon up at the top here, or I can double tap Shift on my keyboard and it'll open it for me. So if you recall, in our last video we created a new account and the name on it was Simon Westlake. So I could search for that. I could just search for Simon. I can also search for part of the address, so I could search for Michigan. I could search for the email address that I put on the account. I could search for the phone number on the account. I can really look for almost anything related to that account. The other thing I can do if I know what the account ID is I can type in account and then a colon and then the ID. And what that'll do is look for an account in the system that has that particular account number and display it to me. So I'm just going to look by name for now. My account ID here is 1000, so that's what I need to search for to find that. And I'm just going to click on this account and bring it up. And now we're back onto the account. Okay, so let's go to the billing tab, and we have a lead account right now. So we're not billing yet, this account's not active, we haven't moved it into an active status, so I'm going to do some pre-setup. I'm going to add a service, and if you recall we had that gold internet service we made earlier on in this series. I'm going to add that. I can pick a quantity to add, so if I was billing them for multiple instances of this service I could add more than one. I only want to add one. I can override the name, so if for some reason you want to display the service with a different name to this customer, I can enter that name here and this will show up on the invoice, it'll show up in a transaction list, that kind of thing. I can prorate adding the service to the account, and I can choose the date I want to prorate it as of. So what this is for is if, for example, you're adding a service to an account today, but it really should have been prorated from a couple of days ago, I can come in here and say this should have been prorated as of the 28th, not the 30th. Now, one thing you'll note is if I check prorate here and add this, it's not going to actually prorate the transaction because it's going to look at the account and see that it's not an active account and it's not going to be prorated. But I'm going to check prorate here anyway just so I can show you how to look at this. So the service got added, and if I look over in my logs, it's telling me not applying the prorated transaction because the account status is not active. So what will now happen is when I activate this account, it'll actually prorate that charge as of the activation date up till the next billing cycle dates. This allows you to add services onto the account ahead of time, and then when the account's actually activated, we'll prorate out to the next billing date automatically. Okay, so let's go down to payment methods, and I want to add a credit card on here, so I'm going to click Create. I'm going to select credit card as my type. I'm going to put in the card number. I'm going to put in an expiration date. Name on the card. It's automatically populated the physical address as the billing address for the card, but I can change this to something else if I want to. Then I have the option to make this an automatic payment method or not. If I make it automatic, then when billing runs, we'll use this as an automatic payment method to charge for the amount of the bill. If I don't make it automatic, it has to be run manually. Okay, so my payment method's been added. You can see I have the auto flag on here. I can come in here and turn auto off or on if I want to, as well as being able to edit the billing address and the expiration on the card. Once cards have been added to Sonar, we can't actually edit the card number anymore. So if this was a new card that the customer was adding, you would just delete this existing one and then add a new one. Okay, so let's go up to transactions. If you look up at the top above here, we have short amount of info here. We have the balance due, the account balance, the available funds, and the next recurring charge. So the balance due is the amount of invoices that are past due. So if I had an invoice past due or that was due for $25, this would show 25. If I had one invoice due for 25 and one for 10, this would show 35. The account balance is the total of all the debits on the account minus any discounts or payments. So if this is positive, it means there's some amount owed on the account, but it may not be invoiced yet. So the account balance and balance due may be different. If you have debits on the account that haven't been invoiced yet, our account balance is going to be higher in that case. Available funds are payments or discounts that have not yet been used to pay off invoices. So we'll make a payment on here in a minute, and you can see what that looks like. And then our next recurring charge is a calculation of how much our next bill is going to be. So it's $51.25 because we have one service on here for $50 and there's taxes associated with that that'll be charged that'll equal $1.25. So our next recurring charge is going to be $51.25. So under transactions, let's make a payment so we can see these values update. I'm going to make a payment. It can be one of these four, which don't require a payment processor, or the credit card I added. So in the credit card I added, I can make a payment against the balance due or the total balance. Both are zero, so I can't pay those right now. Or I can pay another amount. Let's say I'm going to pay $10. We can apply the payment to unpaid invoices automatically or not. So this is checked by default. It'll pay the oldest invoice off first with this payment if this is checked. If it's unchecked, you can manually apply this payment to invoices as you see fit. So let's go ahead and make this payment. So our payment's been made. It was successful. We now have $10 in available funds to apply to an invoice. And if I open up the transaction itself, I can see the result. It was successful. Payment reference is going to be what came back from IPPay. If you're using a different processor, same deal. Whatever they send us back as a message will display here. And then the transaction ID is the ID that came back from that payment processor for us. So we see we had a successful payment there. Now let's make a payment that's going to fail. So I'm going to trigger a failure here. And you'll see we get a failure to apply the payment, and it comes back with a decline message. And if I close out of here, you see we now show a failed payment on the list here, and I can expand that out, and I can see the message that came back from the processor there. So this may say, you know, unavailable card, or no available funds, or card declined, or you know, whatever the case may be. It's going to depend on the processor you're using. Okay, so we can also add one-time transactions here. So I could come in and add a one-time transaction, and I can use my recurring transactions to add a one-time, as well as my configured one-time transaction. So if I wanted to charge a one-time fee for this Gold Internet service, I could do that here. If I want to charge my printed invoice fee I created, I could do that. You'll probably have other one-time and recurring services here you can use, like install fees, service call fee, anything like that. But I can pick those here. So if I pick my printed invoice fee and I add that to the account, it's going to create a debit for $2 because that's how much my printed invoice fee is. And you can now see my account balance is $2, but my balance due is $0. My balance due is $0 because this has not yet been invoiced. It's just a transaction sitting on the account. So this will get pulled up into our next invoice when our billing cycle runs, or I could create an invoice manually right now to be able to give to the customer. So I'll show you how to do that. If we go to invoices and click create, I can pick all the debits on the account that are currently uninvoiced, so all we have right now is the printed invoice fee. I can pick a custom due date. If I don't, it's going to use whatever my default due date configuration settings are under my billing parameters. So I'm going to leave this one blank. I can pick an invoice date, so this is going to be the date that the invoice is for. This defaults to today. You can make it a different date if you need to. Can have a message to the customer displayed on the invoice, and I can automatically apply available funds to the invoice. So I'm going to uncheck this. If I left this checked, it would take $2 out of my available funds to pay off this invoice. But if I uncheck it, it's not going to take that money and I'll be able to do it manually. So let's just go ahead and submit this. So I now have an invoice on my account. If I expand it, I can see there's no credits on it. We only have one debit on it for $2. There's no taxes on it because this printed invoice fee doesn't have any taxes associated. There's $2 due out of a $2 total. It's due on June 9th because my billing configuration is to add 10 days onto the due date. And it's a 1-month invoice. So in some cases we have invoices that are created annually or something like that. If that was the case, I'd see 12 months here. Anytime I create an invoice manually, it's always going to be a 1-month invoice, so it doesn't really apply in this case. And then if I open up the menu here, there's a number of things I can do to the invoice here. I can download a copy of the invoice as a PDF. I can download it as a statement as a PDF. I can download it in Excel format. I can add credits, I can void the invoice, all kinds of stuff. So if I do add credit, I can take from my available funds, and I'm going to say I can either apply the maximum available, or I can explicitly apply an amount. So I'm going to say the maximum available right now, but I could just say $2 since that's what's due. And what that'll do is take $2 from that $10 payment I had and apply it to this invoice, which now zeroes it out. So now my balance due is 0, my available funds is 8, because we just removed $2 from the $10 payment I made. And if I go back here and expand out that payment, I can now see $2 of this payment has been applied to invoice number 1, and on my invoice list is invoice number 1. So we're just doing some basic addition of services and transactions here, applying payments and that kind of thing. So this is if I was doing this all manually. So let's go ahead and activate this account now, and when I activate it, I have the option again to prorate. That's because I'm a super user. If I wasn't a super user, the proration would be enforced. And when I activate the account, I've now had a debit created, which is a prorated charge for the remaining time in my billing cycle for that service that we added here a few minutes ago. So the transaction is for $3.28, and if I go to my parameters, I can see my next bill date is June 1st. Well, it's May 30th today as I make this video, so it's prorated us for a couple of days there. And if I go take a look at that transaction, you're able to see in here this was a prorated charge from May 30th to June 1st. So now what's going to happen is we have $3.28 in an account balance. It's not due yet because it hasn't been invoiced, but when billing runs on the 1st, it's going to take that charge and it's going to include it in that next invoice that's generated automatically. So you don't need to invoice all these little charges manually if you don't want to. You can just wait for the next billing cycle and have that apply. So in the next videos we're going to move on to going through some billing cycles and that kind of thing, but hopefully this gives you a quick overview of adding services to the account, how payments work, how we can generate an invoice and apply payments to it, that kind of thing.